body. The next shortlisted project for the Stirling Prize tries to do all this, plus something more ambitious. It tries to embody the spirit of a nation. The building which attempted to do that for Scotland was the controversial winner of last year's Stirling Prize. The £430 million Parliament in Edinburgh may have impressed the architectural cognoscenti, but still leaves many Scots at best confused and more often livid. So how have things turned out for the United Kingdom's other newly devolved nation? Like the Scottish Parliament, the new Welsh Assembly opened several years later than was planned. And it too cost a lot more than originally estimated, though at £60 million, it's a bargain by comparison. Cardiff's contender is smaller and simpler than its northern relative, but has to meet the same tricky set of demands. Of course, a parliament has to look significant. Well, what shape should it take in the 21st century? I mean, should it be a Gothic palace or a Roman temple? Well, regardless of its shape, of course, it has to be an icon for its people. And of course, these days it has to be accessible and transparent as well, which is the paradox that this building tries to solve. The giant canopy of a roof is part of the solution. It's like the market awnings which inspired the Idea Store. As you shelter under the overhang and look through the big shop window, you're being embraced by the building before you've even found the door. It's meant to suggest there are no barriers here, that the interior is just as much a public space as the exterior. This building's bid to be an icon lies with its extraordinary red cedar roof. I think it's actually a huge Welsh magic mushroom. But the architects intended a different symbolism. Richard Rogers wanted this to be a gathering place, as though under a giant Welsh oak with an undulating canopy. Look, here it is. And it does sort of work. I mean, this place is more than just a glass box with a roof on it. People genuinely pop in here for a Cardiff cappuccino. The place is much more accessible than the forbidding Scottish Parliament, or indeed Westminster. The Welsh seem to be making themselves at home here. Inside the mushroom stalk is where the politicians debate. The public can look down on their representatives at work. The design makes sure the voters stay on top. So tell me how this building defines Welshdom, being Welsh. The building is not larded with lots of imagery. There's no leeks, there are no dragons.
We don't feel we need to assert ourselves with symbolism because this is the symbol.
One big symbol. The whole building, it becomes a symbol itself.
Indeed, indeed. And there's no flag waving in this building. And I've got a bit of an emotional reaction still to being in this building because I've campaigned over the years for the establishment of a devolved parliament in Wales. Even now when I walk through and stand on those wonderful pieces of slate up from Snowdonia, I think, well, this is it. This design is an open statement about what a new democracy looks like.
The dome of the debating chamber is dazzling. But it isn't just a dramatic architectural statement. It's the core of this building's impressive green credentials. The whole thing is a super-efficient ventilating chimney. At its tip, the cowl on the roof catches the breeze, which sucks out the stale hot air from below. There's plenty of that when the politicians are in session. Most of this building's many eco-friendly features are hidden away. No one sees the biomass boilers or ground source heat pumps. But by making the wind cowl so visibly the centre of the building, this design at least wears its environmental heart on its sleeve. This is one of the greenest public buildings in Europe. And it shows that sustainability is no longer an afterthought. It is now becoming part of the design process. It's shaping buildings. And that is something we're going to see a lot more of. The Welsh may have built themselves the most truly democratic home for any political body in Britain. It's the Stirling shortlist's third and perhaps finest example of a new breed of civic building. Generous spaces which enthusiastically welcome the British public they're designed to serve. Yet the irony is that for some of the very best in British architecture this year, you have to go abroad. That means enduring this hell. Britain has Europe's busiest airport, Heathrow. It also has Europe's ugliest airports, none of which are pleasant to be in. I mean, being processed through this place is degrading, it's disorientating, it's just confusing. And none of the tens of thousands of people currently in this building want to be here. Thank goodness that as long as the architects are registered in Britain, the Stirling Prize can be won by projects anywhere in the European Union. Good Lord, this is more like it. I have just spent 5 hours in sensory deprivation, in a cramped grey building with endless grey corridors and then a grey aeroplane. And you get here and it's like a release for the spirit. This is a glorious, colourful cathedral. Terminal 4 of Madrid Barajas Airport is a true megastructure. 1.2 kilometres long, 1 million square metres in area, €1 billion budget. An entire river was diverted to make room for it. It was the biggest construction project in Europe. If that wavy bamboo roof reminds you of the Welsh Assembly, it's because this is by the same architect, one of Britain's most renowned, Lord Rogers, this time working with the Spanish practice Estudio Lamela. Bold colour choices have definitely been making a comeback in architecture recently. Here, Rogers has cracked open every can of paint in the shop. Now that is pure Jaffa orange juice, that one is, that's Seville marmalade, and the one beyond is Kia Ora squash. Do you know, if I were an architect and I had a kilometre-long building, the cheapest, the easiest way of bringing some vitality to the space is by applying colour, and lots of it, changing the colour all the way down the building so that it creates a sort of colour narrative. Oh, look, that's the colour of sunny delight. You know, very often, the worst bit of an airport is baggage reclaim, which takes place in some dark, underground, jam-packed space. Here, however, although I'm deep inside the building, it's spacious and airy, and it is naturally lit. Sun floods through what the architects call canyons, deep gorges that plunge to the bottom of the building. These also help break the terminal into distinct zones. After arrival, you cross a bridge. You cross another one after passport control. From these bridges, you can get your bearings, as well as dramatic views. The airport brings a sense of occasion and romance back to travel. The soaring spaces and elegant engineering mean it's closer to the great Victorian railway stations than the hell of Heathrow. And despite all the crossing flows of movement here, travelling through this airport is a remarkably straightforward and calm experience. Do you know, ever since I got off that plane, it feels like I've more or less been travelling in a straight line, unlike the journey through those incomprehensible labyrinths in most British airports. And look, here's the arrivals hall. Madrid beckons. The new Terminal 4 is actually quite a simple structure. It uses a kit of standard components which are endlessly repeated. It's really just an elaborate shed. In some ways, it's the culmination of the ultra-rational, high-tech style which Richard Rogers has developed over the past 40 years. Nothing is hidden. You can see what's holding the building up and together. Necessities like air vents are made the stars of the show rather than hidden away. But here, as at the Welsh Assembly, there's a new sensuality to Rogers' work. The forms have become more organic, even poetic. The good news for us in Britain is that the Richard Rogers Partnership are currently building this, Heathrow's new Terminal 5. The not-so-good news, the whole Spanish project was designed and built in less time than it took our new terminal just to get through the British planning process.
I mean, there is a tremendous cult of management in Britain. You get a situation where people are only interested in the immediate cost and not long-term value or environmental sustainability, except you have to do it for regulations and laws and so on. And you're always being asked to engineer out something, you know, like the overhang of a roof because you can save sixpence halfpenny. And you know, really, if you have to say, the Welsh Assembly wasn't a dream job. It was a painful work. If somebody says, "How about Madrid?" Madrid, you know, is 1,000 times better. The people who ran it had 1,000 times better management and vision.
Heathrow Terminal 5 will finally open in 2008, nearly 20 years after Rogers won the job. And it's costing twice as much per square metre as Madrid. It's a shame that so many British clients don't commission work on this kind of scale, with this kind of imagination. We have some of the very best engineers and architects in Britain, and yet so much of their best work is abroad. A case in point is the bookies' favourite to win the Stirling Prize. I travelled across the continent to see it. A few years ago, this somewhat obscure German city wanted to attract more visitors. So they've created Phaeno, the country's first science museum. And to build it, they hired the newest, hippest name on the global architecture A-list, Zaha Hadid. Zaha's long been fascinated by the idea of urban landscapes. Phaeno even includes artificial hills, as if the asphalt and concrete have been eroded by a river running through. Your first encounter with the building, of course, is really important, and it's rather rather unusual to find that first encounter with the building's bottom. But it's meant to be a friendly gesture. This site is a key junction in the city, and the architects didn't want to get in people's way. Instead of making them walk round her new structure, Zaha's raised it up off the ground so locals can still take their shortcuts to the station or factory. Inside, too, Zaha has created a whole new Zahadian landscape. The floor erupts to form slopes, or drops away to form craters. This is a building which invites you to explore it as much as what's inside it. It kickstarts the imagination. This is Zaha putting science fact in a landscape which is pure science fiction. It's very different to your average museum, where you have to follow a set route through a linear sequence of rooms. Here, you just head over to whatever looks interesting. It's a refreshing approach to museum design. But what's revolutionary here, what makes this stand apart from anything else on the Stirling Prize shortlist, is the way it reinvents structure. Zaha does not like right angles. In fact, he says, why use 90 degrees when there are 359 other angles you can use? Most people would answer that it's easier for a building to stand up if it has straight walls. But Zaha's museum is held up by sloping cones, all of which are at different angles, like a table with wonky legs. It's standing on tiptoe. These cones have also been hollowed out to eggshell thinness and put to use. You get up into the museum through one of them, for instance. Phaeno marks a sea change in how buildings are designed and engineered. The most basic type of building that served us well for thousands of years, well into the 20th century, has consisted of putting uprights into the ground, walls, on top of which we've placed roofs. For the past 30 or 40 years, however, the high-tech architects like Richard Rogers have made their structures more complicated, more elegant, and have expressed them, so you've been able to see all the engineering. However, that's not how Zaha works. She likes to start with a slab of material, which she can then mould and distort and shape to form both floors and ceilings, walls. The building becomes one giant curved volume. What's revolutionary is there are no breaks or joins. Now, I know that Zaha is not going to employ me as her model maker, but you can see that because her buildings are conceived to be so organic, so fluid, so seamless, that there is absolutely no way you can build them out of lots of little traditional components. Instead, Zaha's vision depends on concrete, 75,000 cubic meters of it. As a liquid, it can be molded to form a single, continuous, unbroken structure. It's very apt that a building dedicated to science has pushed forward the limits of current technology.
When this building was done 4 years ago, the software was just about becoming available. So prior to that time, you could actually never have conceived or analyzed something like this. You know, the building had to be split into 40,000 small pieces in order to understand how each part behaves, if you can imagine that.
How on earth could you govern what was happening on site?
The technology we had was setting out points in space for them all the time.
You mean
So
in thin air?
in
Points
thin
in
air,
thin
yeah.
air?
Points in thin air.
Yeah, but look. Finding a point in space on a computer is one thing. Finding a point in space on a building site is quite another, isn't it?
Especially on a freezing cold, snowy day, they had lots of problems, of course, yeah.
See, what I don't understand is why you feel the need to give yourself such a hard time by not putting in extra conventional supports.
No, because that would defeat the purpose. British engineering has been about wiping the slate clean and pioneering and innovating whenever we get the chance. And here we saw that opportunity.
But why is it that you can't get a building like this, that Zaha can't get a building like this commissioned in the UK, and yet it's designed there and it's engineered there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the London scene in terms of design is probably, in my view, the capital of the world. But in terms of risk, it's very risk averse. I haven't had the opportunity to convince anybody this is possible in the UK yet.
All Zaha's buildings so far have been abroad. Born in Baghdad, her practice has been based in London for 30 years. But for most of that time, British clients seem to have found her too radical.
And there was a period in Britain where really nobody trusted architects, nobody liked them. They thought they had destroyed the city. But there's still, this feeling is still lingering on.
But given the work that you've done, I mean, all over the shop, Middle East, America, Europe...
I should have much more work here.
Yeah, exactly. And you must feel resentful.
I'm not.
No?
No, I mean, I'm not resentful. I just think it's sad. I mean, it's as much my loss as theirs. You know, I mean, I think it's a pity because we do have an opinion about this place. I think we have a contribution to make.
Because you see, you've got a reputation out there, haven't you? I mean, people say that, you know, you're demanding, you're a diva.
Because they're not used to women making demands. They're not used to women having an opinion. I actually notice it more, interestingly, here than in Europe.
Really?
In Europe, people don't look at you as a woman architect. They look at you as an architect.
Over the coming months, Scotland will finally get some Zaha structures, a cancer care centre in Fife and a transport museum in Glasgow. But I still find it frustrating that Britain's most talented architects seem to be doing their best work abroad. Meanwhile, the UK is often let down by a lack of vision from the other people who make buildings possible. The planners, the managers, and the clients. Just look at the rest of this year's Stirling shortlist. The Welsh Assembly was years late. At one stage, they actually sacked their architect, Richard Rogers, only to re-employ him a year later. All our public services should be demanding buildings as good as the Idea Store or Evelina Hospital. But sadly, these remain rare exceptions in a sea of mediocrity. And why aren't more property developers showing the imagination of the brick house? It's clear to me that there's no shortage of talent amongst our architects here, and no shortage of ideas either. Where we fall down is in not always standing by them in Britain. Hello, welcome back to the very noisy Roundhouse in North London, where I'm surrounded by 800 extremely rowdy architects and their clients, and also by the great and good from the world of design, all of whom are working their way through the bar very quickly, and they're waiting to hear who the winner is of this year's RIBA Stirling Prize. Now, looking at the contenders, this year's sort of turned out to be the year of the roof, where the familiar and rather forbidding materials like concrete and steel and glass have been joined by brick and bamboo, and even colour, all of which means these buildings are taking on more approachable characters. They're reaching out to make friends with you and give you an enveloping soft hug, or in the case of Zaha, an enveloping concrete hug. But which of them has won your affections? You've been voting on our People's Choice phone line, and for the past 2 weeks the lines have been melting. But they've just closed, we've counted the votes, and I can tell you that with 49%, the winner is the Evelina Children's Hospital. Hello, congratulations. There you go. In second place, so I think 29% of the votes, it is the Welsh Parliament. But do the judges see things your way? They are, after all, architectural professionals. So let's find out right now. I'm going to hand over to the President of the Royal Institute of British Architects, Jack Pringle.
Thank you very much. The £20,000 RIBA Stirling Prize is sponsored by the Architects Journal and is the UK's most important architectural prize. This year, 6 brilliant clients found the right architects for them, who then designed 6 fabulous buildings. And the winner of the 2006 Stirling Prize for the building of the year is Madrid Airport by the Richard Rogers Architects.
Madrid Airport, designed by Richard Rogers Partnership. The Richard Rogers Partnership has been nominated several times for the Stirling. It's the first time that he and the practice have won. But that's not surprising that such a beautiful and perfectly realised building should win. It also represents something of a landmark building for Richard Rogers himself, because it brings together so many of the ideas that he's been working on for over 4 decades. An ultra-rational style with a strong engineering barriers. What a bunch of you, honestly. Let me through. Oh. Now then, I'm going to bring you forward. Now then, Lord Rogers. Richard Rogers. Richard, you know, you've been nominated, what? You've been nominated, what, 3 times now?
Have I?
And this is the first time you've won. So tell me why this building is special for you, because it does represent something of a culmination, doesn't it?
Yes, it's certainly the most exciting building I've been involved with for many decades. And then again, I have to thank, it's not me, it's a team. It's an unbelievable team. Lamellas, all the people who work with me, the consultants, they've been great. At the same time, you know, what it's all about is quality of design. And I think one's seen today what a quality we can have. And sometimes I get depressed when I look around and see what is happening outside. This is real quality. I mean, there wasn't a single project I saw which wasn't good. But of course, I have to thank specifically again the client, and the client has been unbelievable.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, congratulations to Lord Rogers, Richard Rogers Practice. Let's just remind ourselves of what it was in their design that wooed and charmed the judges' hearts. Well, joining me now is the editor of the Architects Journal and, of course, veteran Stirling judge, Isabel Allen. And to offer their take on this year's lineup as well, the artistic director of the Institute of Contemporary Arts, Ekow Eshun, and the designer and architectural pundit, Wayne Hemingway. Now, Isabel, you met this afternoon. None of you, of course, knew who was going to win because it was a secret ballot. But what was the discussion like? Were you all of one mind?
I wouldn't say that. I'll tell you what we didn't do. We didn't worry about the fact that the media tomorrow will doubtless find some snagging fault with this building, to mention.
Immediately?
Immediately. I think, you know, in the light of what you said about the media coverage today, I think there's one surefire way of producing a building that has no bad coverage, and that's to do the same mediocrity that's been churned out for the last 25 years. And I have to say about that shortlist, every one of those buildings will have problems because every one of them absolutely push the boundaries of what we should be doing, and I think you can't fault them for that.
Here. Okay, you visited the airport, haven't you? You've been through it. So what's it like as a punter?
Well, it's massive for a start, and it's quite exhausting walking through it. But what it is, it's a properly people-centred airport. If you think about going to Heathrow or something like that, what an appalling, depressing, claustrophobic experience this is something different. You know, the use of colour in there, the use of scale in there, it's actually kind of fun, you know. And to be honest, it's not a word you use very often when it comes to airports.
No, indeed. Well, many public buildings, Wayne, for that matter, is it? I mean, you know, we're not famous in this country for commissioning fabulous public architecture.
Well, there's a problem. It's kind of it's in the national psyche, I think, to put things in the way. And until we have a kind of a revamp of the civil service and how they approach their work and how they commission, and stop just going for, like, we've got certain architects that are on a roster, they've got to be accredited here, until they're willing to kind of put in the extra hours, to put their head above the parapet and take risks. And they're all, you know, civil services frightened to death of the media as well. Until all of that changes, then we're going to keep offering mediocrity.
Basically, I mean, what's exciting to me here is that I think all 6 of these buildings are actually, and certainly all the public ones, are really inspiring. You know, they really set out to raise the bar and to say to people, well, look, you can have an airport, you can have a hospital, you can have a library, and it can be a thing you can look up to. And that's not an elitist thing, that's a thing that opens the doors to everyone. And for me, that's very, very exciting.
It's the most inclusive list, shortlist in any design competition has been in a long time. Everything, you know, you can see why the public voted for the hospital, because, you know, the majority of us are kind of disillusioned with the whole hospital experience in terms of the environment that you go into. That's what they voted for. We want change in our airports. We want change in our libraries, and this is a fantastic shortlist.
I actually think that, you know, Britain as a culture, something Wayne was pointing out, is still scared of modern buildings, still scared of the idea that, you know, a contemporary building will sort of alienate people. And in fact, these buildings say the opposite of that. They just say that, you know what, a big public building can actually make us all feel better, can in certain respects make us heal better, but they can, you know, they can build a better world. And I think that's a very important thing.
I mean, Isabel, I mean, do we have the clients? I mean, if we don't exactly have the planning system, we don't exactly have the management structure, or if we don't have the kind of culture of commissioning here, do we have the clients?
No, I think there's a problem. I think you have to admit, I think these clients have been exemplary, but well over half of them, especially if you count Wales as abroad, were not English.
Yeah. I mean, Zaha's building 2 buildings, but they're both in Scotland, of course.
I mean, you know, all the more credit, I have to say, to the clients of the buildings which were in England. That's great. But there is a problem, and I think there's,
Well, thank you very much. We're going to have to wrap it up there. I'm sorry. My thanks to Isabel Allen, to Ekow, Eshun, and to Wayne Hemingway. My thanks also to the Royal Institute of British Architects, and, of course, to the Roundhouse. Congratulations to Richard Rogers' partnership, everyone involved with the design and construction of Madrid Airport. We leave you with a last glimpse of the newly crowned Stirling Prize winner for 2006. Good night.